When an avoidant realizes they're dealing with pure physical attraction rather than deep emotional connection, their behavior shifts dramatically in ways that reveal the difference between someone they're sexually attracted to versus someone they actually love. The subtle psychological investments they make when genuine feelings are involved disappear completely when it's just lust, creating a stark contrast that exposes their true emotional state and intentions. They stop investing in your emotional world. When it's genuine love, avoidants make small but significant investments in understanding your emotional landscape. They remember what upsets you, notice your mood changes, and store information about your feelings even when they struggle to respond appropriately. With pure lust, this emotional investment vanishes completely because your inner world becomes irrelevant to their purposes. They stop asking follow-up questions about things that matter to you, stop remembering details about your emotional experiences, and stop showing any curiosity about your thoughts, feelings, or psychological state. Your emotions become background noise. They tune out rather than information they unconsciously catalog and consider. This emotional disinvestment is particularly telling because it reveals that their previous attention to your feelings wasn't just politeness, it was genuine care masked by their defensive patterns. When lust is the only motivator, they can't be bothered with the emotional labor of understanding someone they don't actually love. The shift from caring about your emotional state to complete indifference about your inner world is one of the clearest indicators that you've moved from the love category to the lust category in their psychological filing system. They abandon future-oriented thinking. Avoidants who genuinely love someone unconsciously include that person in their future planning, even when they're not ready to commit openly. They make casual references to future scenarios, consider you when making long-term decisions, and maintain mental space for your ongoing presence in their life. With pure lust, this future orientation disappears entirely. They stop making any references to plans that include you beyond immediate gratification, stop considering how their decisions might affect you long-term, and stop maintaining any mental blueprint for ongoing connection. You become a present-moment experience, rather than someone with a future role in their life. This shift to purely present-focused interaction reveals that their psychological investment in your continued presence has evaporated. When love is involved, they can't help but think about you in future contexts. But lust requires no such forward-thinking consideration. The absence of future-oriented language and planning becomes glaringly obvious once you know what to look for, making it clear that you're no longer occupying space in their long-term mental landscape. They stop protecting your feelings. When avoidants genuinely love someone, they instinctively protect that person's feelings even while struggling with intimacy themselves. They might be emotionally unavailable, but they're careful not to be deliberately cruel or unnecessarily hurtful. With pure lust, this protective instinct disappears completely. They become willing to say or do things that hurt your feelings if it serves their immediate purposes, stop considering the emotional impact of their words and actions, and abandon any sense of responsibility for your psychological well-being. Your emotional safety becomes irrelevant to their agenda. This shift from careful emotional protection to callous disregard is particularly painful because it reveals how much care was actually present in their previous behavior, even when that care was expressed through avoidant patterns rather than healthy communication. The contrast between their former careful handling of your emotions and their new indifference to your feelings makes it clear that something fundamental has changed in how they categorize you psychologically. They eliminate intimate conversation. Avoidants who love someone find themselves drawn into deeper conversations, despite their usual preference for emotional surface-level interaction. They share thoughts, opinions, and occasionally feelings, because genuine connection creates natural curiosity about each other's minds. With pure lust, this conversational depth disappears completely. They stop initiating meaningful conversations, show no interest in your thoughts or opinions beyond what's immediately relevant to their physical agenda, and actively avoid any topics that might create emotional intimacy or psychological connection. This conversational shift from occasional depth to consistent superficiality reveals that their interest in your mind was genuine rather than strategic. When love is involved, they can't help but be curious about how you think. But lust requires no such mental connection. The reduction of conversation to purely functional exchanges makes it clear that your psychological complexity and intellectual depth have become irrelevant to their purposes. They stop considering your comfort. When avoidants genuinely love someone, they pay attention to that person's comfort levels, emotional, physical, and psychological. They notice when you're uncomfortable and make adjustments, even when they struggle with intimacy themselves. With pure lust, this consideration for your comfort evaporates entirely. They become willing to put you in uncomfortable situations. If it serves their purposes, stop noticing or caring about your stress levels and abandon any responsibility for ensuring your well-being during interactions. Your comfort becomes secondary to their gratification. This shift from subtle caretaking to complete disregard for your comfort reveals that their previous consideration wasn't just good manners. It was genuine care expressing itself through protective behavior. The contrast between former attention to your comfort and current indifference to your well-being makes it obvious that your happiness and peace of mind are no longer priorities in their decision-making process. They abandon exclusive focus during intimacy. Avoidants who love someone become completely absorbed in that person during intimate moments, giving total attention and presence that contradicts their usual emotional distance. With pure lust, this exclusive focus disappears because you become interchangeable with anyone else who could provide similar physical gratification. They become mentally distant during physical intimacy, show less attention to your specific responses and preferences, and treat sexual encounters as generic physical release rather than connection with someone irreplaceable. This shift from complete presence to emotional absence during intimacy reveals that their former focused attention was about connecting with you specifically rather than just physical gratification with any available partner. The difference between being seen and being used during intimate moments becomes unmistakable once you understand what genuine presence versus performed interest looks like. They stop investing in understanding your patterns. When avoidants genuinely love someone, they unconsciously study that person's patterns, preferences, and psychological rhythms because understanding someone they care about feels important even when they struggle with closeness. With pure lust, this psychological curiosity disappears completely. They stop paying attention to what makes you happy, stop noticing your behavioral patterns, and stop storing information about your preferences and needs. You become a more generic experience rather than a specific person they're trying to understand and connect with. This shift from unconscious psychological study to complete lack of interest in your patterns reveals that their former attention was genuine care, expressing itself through observation and mental note-taking about someone they valued. The absence of any curiosity about who you are beyond your physical availability makes it clear that your individual characteristics have become irrelevant to their agenda. They eliminate emotional regulation behavior. Avoidants who love someone often unconsciously help regulate that person's emotions. They provide comfort during stress, show concern during difficult times, and offer stability during emotional turbulence, even when they struggle with their own emotional expression. With pure lust, this regulation behavior disappears completely. They become indifferent to your emotional state, show no concern during your difficult moments, and abandon any responsibility for providing emotional support or stability. Your emotional well-being becomes someone else's problem rather than something they feel instinctively compelled to address. This shift from unconscious emotional caretaking to complete emotional indifference reveals that their former supportive behavior wasn't strategic relationship maintenance. It was genuine care expressing itself through protective instincts. The contrast between former emotional support and current emotional abandonment makes it obvious that your psychological welfare is no longer something they feel responsible for or invested in. They stop creating shared experiences. When avoidants genuinely love someone, they find themselves wanting to create memories and shared experiences together, even when they struggle with commitment and future planning. With pure lust, this desire for shared experience creation disappears because memories and bonding become irrelevant to purely physical agenda. They stop suggesting activities that would create bonding opportunities, show no interest in experiences that would deepen connection, and limit interaction to what's necessary for physical gratification. Building shared history becomes pointless when emotional connection isn't the goal. This shift from unconsciously creating bonds through shared experiences to avoiding any activities that might create emotional connection reveals the fundamental difference between wanting someone in your life versus just wanting access to their body. They abandon protective instincts. Perhaps most tellingly, avoidants who love someone develop protective instincts toward that person that persist even when they're struggling with intimacy. With pure lust, these protective feelings disappear entirely because your welfare becomes irrelevant to their purposes. They stop caring about your safety, stop feeling concerned about people who might hurt you, and abandon any sense of responsibility for your protection or well-being. You become dispensable rather than precious. The elimination of all these caring behaviors reveals that when avoidants truly love someone, they invest in that person's emotional world, future presence, comfort, and well-being in ways they can't fake or perform. When it's just lust, these investments disappear because emotional connection becomes irrelevant to purely physical agenda.